Hey Cheva, what's going on? Welcome back to Babel on Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Ayin Vav, Daf 76 of Masechta Ayruvin. At the beginning we start talking, we talk some more about these interesting kind of courtyard configurations. And then we complete the sixth parak of Masechta Ayruvin, and we move on to the seventh parak of Masechta Ayruvin. Very exciting. And we talk about different openings like windows and stuff between different chutzers and being able to join different chutzers together, or maybe not being able to join different chutzers together. We get to some Gemara math, circles and squares. Yay! Anyways, cool. Then we get to a new mission at the end. Chevra, let's move on. We are on Daf Ayin Hamud base, 3 lines from the bottom. Amar of Nachman, Amar Rabba bar Avua, Amar Rav. Beis Chatzeros v'gimel batim beinehen. Interesting. So you have 2 chutzers, okay? Now, in between these 2 chutzers are like 3 townhouses, okay? Now, let's start again from the beginning. So, 2 chutzers, right? So, in each of the 2 chutzers, there is a house in the chutzer. Great. Now, between the 2 chutzers, there are 3 townhouses. Now, the outer of the 3 townhouses, meaning the one on either end, is open also into one of the chutzers, right? So what you have is in each chutzer you have a house, and then you have also, one of the ends of the townhouses, like, depending on which side you're on, either the first or the third townhouse, is also open into the chutzner. And then there's a townhouse in the middle that is open into both of the other townhouses. Like you could just walk into a door and walk through a door into the other one. So you can kind of walk from one chutzner through each townhouse and technically get to the other chutzner, okay? That's what we're talking about. So now, these 2 chutzers wanted to join together in a common Eruv so that they can carry, from one to the other. So what they did was, each of the 2 houses in the chutzers, they took a loaf of bread from their house, they walked through the first townhouse and put it in the middle townhouse. So both of the houses one house from each of the 2 chutzers walked through their, first townhouses, and they both put their bread in the middle townhouse. Now, so, what happens is, there's only like 3 houses here, technically, right? Meaning there's the house in each of the 2 chutzers, but now the first of the 3 townhouses from either direction is really just a gatehouse for the middle townhouse. So you really have 3 houses, right? You have the house in each of the 2 chutzers, so that's 2 houses, and then you have the middle of the townhouses. The 2 outer townhouses are really just gatehouses for the middle townhouses. So therefore the 2 outer townhouses don't have to contribute anything because they're just gatehouses. And the middle house is the house that they're putting the bread in. So the middle house doesn't have to contribute anything either because they're putting it in his bread. When you're hosting the Eruv, you don't have to contribute because the whole point, right, is that it's like everybody's joining together and spending Shabbos in your house. So memela, you're there. You don't have to bring bread in order to do that. So really, the only people who have to contribute are the houses from the 2 chutzers, but none of the townhouses would have to contribute anything. All right. One of the perks of living in a townhouse that is one of the perks of living in a townhouse that's connected to a chutzner that has one house in it and other townhouses on the other side of it. All right. Very nice. Badik lihu rachba l'rabanan. So now, Rachba wanted to test the rabbis. I think there was a Rachba bin Pumbedisa. I wonder if this is Rachba bin Pumbedisa. But so Rachba was testing the rabbis. Beis Chatzeris uveis batim beineim. Okay, so if we have basically the same setup, but it's slightly different. There's 2 houses in between the chutzers, not 3. Okay, so again, Badiklu Rachba l'Rabbanan. So Rachba was testing the rabbis, and he asked them, Beis Chatzeris uveis batim beineim. So if you have 2 courtyards, and between the 2 courtyards there are 2 houses, 2 townhouses. So now the house that is in the first chutzner, he walked through the first house and put his Eruv in the second townhouse, and then the guy from the other chutzner took his bread and walked through the first townhouse relative to him and put it in the second townhouse. Kanu Eruv Olo Kanu. Kanu Eruv Olo. So, does this work, right? And in this case, they're not actually looking to like join together into one Eruv. They really just want to be able to carry in their own chutzner, right? And what they're doing is they're taking their bread, they're walking through the first townhouse that they get to and putting it in the second townhouse. So is that going to work as to be able to allow them to carry in their own chutzner or not? If you guys were one of the rabbis with Rachba, what would you have responded to Rachba? I don't know. Mimashvinan lahu legabe dehai bias ulegabe dehai beis sha'ar ulegabe dehai bias beis sha'ar ulegabe dehai bias. Do we say that the each of the townhouses can kind of like wear both hats, right? Meaning, so when the bread is being walked through it to get to the second one, so it can be considered like a gatehouse, but then when the guy from the other chutzner is walking through the other house to put the bread in it, well then maybe it could be considered like a house. So maybe it can kind of work both ways, and it would be an acceptable Eruv. So sometimes it's a gatehouse, sometimes it's like an actual house. That's what we're trying to figure out. Can we say that, or do we say no, like you got to choose one? So Amru Le, so they said to Rachba, Shnehen lo kanu Eruv. They said, yeah, this is not going to work. Neither chutzner is going to be able to make an Eruv like this. Because manafshach, either way you look at it. If you consider the house to be a gatehouse, well then somebody who puts his Eruv in a gatehouse or some kind of other non-residential kind of like a place where you don't live, so eno Eruv, it's not an Eruv. And if we're considering these houses to be actual houses, well then you're walking through the first townhouse to get to the second townhouse, and you're putting your bread in the second townhouse, but you're walking through the first townhouse that you didn't make an Eruv with, which is going to be a problem. So they say either way you cut it, it's going to be a problem, and this Eruv is not a good Eruv. But then the Gemara says, but why can't we have it both ways? Why can't we say that each house can sometimes be considered a gatehouse and sometimes be considered a regular house? And when it's a gatehouse, you could walk through it, and when it's a regular house, you can put the Eruv in it. Why is this any different than Rava, the Amar Rava, that Rava said, Amrulo Shnayim, Tseva Ariv Aleinu. If two people said to the Eruv guy, right? We've seen this before also, right? Like these kind of, I wouldn't necessarily say corrupt Eruv guys, but these Eruv guys that kind of decide, if you're nice to me, I'll get your Eruv there on time. If not, then I won't, right? Everyone's busy on Friday. They don't want to be bothered with the Eruv. So there's the Eruv guy. The Eruv guy's a shtickle nudnik, right? Anyways, so what happens this time? So you have two guys, they go to the Eruv guy and they say, hey, can you put out the Eruv for me on Friday afternoon? To one of them, he managed to get there on time before Shabbos, before Ben Hashmoshes. But for the second guy, the Eruv man only got to the location during Ben Hashmashos. And what do we say? So, well, the food that he was able to put out in the proper place before Ben Hashmashos, well, when Ben Hashmashos started, so it was Konesh Shvisa, the Eruv kicked in, and therefore during Ben Hashmashos you could already eat that Eruv. V'zesh Eruv alav Ben Hashmashos, and the Eruv that he only managed to put down during Ben Hashmashos, okay, so obviously then you can't eat it during Ben Hashmashos, but Nechal Eruv Mishatechshach, you can just eat that Eruv where... Oh, one second. Oh, I think I'm translating that wrong. I mean, it's the same intention, but okay, I'm sorry. where am I? Lechad erev alav miba'od yom, v'le'echad erev alav ben hashmashos. Zesh erev alav miba'od yom, ne'echal erev ben hashmashos. His erev got eaten during ben hashmashos, right? So meaning, one of the guys, right? So this erev guy managed to to get one of the erevs in its proper place during the daytime, and the other erev he only managed to get there during ben hashmashos. Now, the way it worked out was that the erev that was put down before Shabbos began got eaten during ben hashmashos, and the erev that was put down during ben hashmashos got eaten once it got dark out. Okay. Shneim kanu erev. Both of those erevs work. So we see that bein hashmashos, which is safek yom, safek laila, we can kind of work it both ways, right? That when the erev is put in its place before bein hashmashos, well then bein hashmashos already can be, right? The erev can be kona already at bein hashmashos, and if it gets eaten during bein hashmashos, it's fine. But if you don't manage to get the erev in its proper place before ben hashmashos, you only get it there during ben hashmashos, well, then, alright, that's okay. And if the erev, as long as the erev doesn't get eaten during ben hashmashos, if it gets eaten once it gets dark, that would be acceptable. So we see the ben hashmashos, which is safek yom, safek laila, can kind of be considered both ways. For the first erev that was put before Shabbos, well then ben hashmashos was already considered like Shabbos, and even though it got eaten during ben hashmashos, it's fine, because when ben hashmashos kicked in, the food was already there. But for the person who the erev was only put down during ben hashmashos, we say, don't worry, ben hashmashos, we're not going to consider it like Shabbos yet, and and since the erev only got eaten once it got dark, then it's okay. Once it gets dark, that's when you were kona shvisa. So we see that ben hashmashos is a suffix, and we can kind of wing it both ways. So why can't we apply the same thing over here? That we have this house, which can kind of go either way. It can either be a gatehouse or it can be a regular house. So why can't we say that, like, depending on the circumstance, it can be considered both ways? So the difference is that over there, when it comes to the eruv, suffix, right, when it comes to this guy who put out the eruv before ben hashmashos, during ben hashmashos, suffix yimama, suffix lelia, lo minkra milsa. When it comes to, when exactly shkia is, when exactly does the night begin, it's not as objective. It's not as clear what's what. But right, and therefore you can kind of, there's more wiggle room to kind of wing it either way. But over here, legabe high bias, legabe the high bias, legabe the high beishar, legabe the high nami beishar. But when it comes to like something that's objective, something that's obvious, like a house, and we're saying, is this a house or is this a gatehouse? Well, you have to be, there isn't really too much wiggle room over here. And if we're going to say that it's considered a gatehouse for this person, well then it's a gatehouse for the other person. If it's considered a regular house for this person, it's a regular house for the other person. We have to be consistent. And as Rashi says, because we saw this the other day as well, that we don't want the words of the rabbis to be, what's his lashon? Kichucha ve'itzlula. Basically like a joke, meaning we can't, just make everything into one big loophole, where sometimes this could be a gatehouse and sometimes it can be a regular house. It depends whichever one works better for you. No, something so objective like this, like what is this house? It's got to only be one thing. Hadron Allah Hadar. So we will come back to you, Perek Hadar. All right. Okay, Chaver, new Perek Chalon, the 7th Perek of Masechta Ayruvin. Chalon shebein beis chatzeres. So if you have two chatzers, and between the chatzers there is a wall, and in the wall there is a window. Okay. Arba al arba besoch asara. So if the window is 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, and it's within 10 tfachim of the ground, well then me'arvin shnayim ve'imratzu me'arvin aleph. Well then, the two chatzers can kind of decide. Either they can make their own individual eruvs. If they want, they could join together in one eruv. Either way, it's basically the equivalent of a Pesach. Either they could make their eruv separately, or they could join together. Really, whichever one they want. However, Pachis midalad adalad, if the window is smaller than 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, or lemaila miyud, or the window is above 10 tfachim, right? So you have 10 tfachim of wall, which is a proper wall, and then above that is this window. Well, in either of these cases, if it's less than 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, or it's above 10 tfachim from the ground, shnayim ma'arvin shnayim ve'en ma'arvin echad. Well, then in that case, there is a proper divider between the two chatzers, and they can make separate erevs, but they cannot join together in an erev. Lema Tanan Stamak Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. So let's say that our Mishnah is like Reb Shimon ben Gamliel. What about Reb Shimon ben Gamliel? We've seen this at least once, right? Way back at the beginning of the Masechta. Can you imagine how long ago? Chevra, we've been learning Ayruvin for a long time. Kol kavod to everybody. I mean, this is difficult stuff. We've been doing this for a long time, about 2.5 months. We've been learning Masechta Ayruvin. Unbelievable. So anyways, one of the things that we've learned in Masechta Ayruvin is that there's a machlokes between Reb Shimon ben Gamliel and the Chachamim about lavud, right? We always assume that lavud is 3 tfachim, that if it's less than 3 tfachim, I believe. Less than 3 tfachim or 3 tfachim or less. I think it's less than 3 tfachim. So then we say lavud. And the two things will be considered connected. But if it's more than 3 tfachim, then 3 tfachim or more, I believe, then we don't say lavud. Whereas Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says that the magic number is 4, not 3. That less than 4 tfachim we say lavud, 4 tfachim or more we don't say lavud. Fine. So pshita. Wait, no. What says the Gemara? Lema tanan stama Reb Shimon ben Gamliel to amar kol pachas me'arba kilavud ami. There you go. If it's less than 4 tfachim, it's lavud. So let's say that this Mishnah is a proof for Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, who says that if that anything that's less than 4 tfachim, we will say lavud. And therefore, what the Gemara wants to assert is that the idea with the measurement of 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim for this window is that, well, if it's less than 4 tfachim, well, then we would say lavud and consider it as though there's no window at all. So this seems to be a support for Shimon ben Gamliel, who says that lavud is defined by 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim. Okay? No, not 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, but that lavud is defined by 4 tfachim, a distance of 4 tfachim. So the Gemara says, "Afilu tema k'Rabbanan." You can even say that this Mishnah is the rabbis. Okay. Ad kan lo plige Rabbanan alei Reb Shimon ben Gamliel elu linyan levudin. Hava linyan pischa afilu Rabbanan modu ti'ika dalad adalad chashiv v'ilo lo chashiv. Let's read that again. So afilu tema k'Rabbanan. You can even say that this Mishnah is like the rabbis. Ad kan lo plige Rabbanan alei Reb Shimon ben Gamliel elu inyan levudin. That the Rabbanan argue with Reb Shimon ben Gamliel when it comes to lavud. Yeah, when it comes to lavud, so they say that the magic number is 3, not 4. But this is not a question of lavud. This is not a question of lavud. This is a question of windows. Haval inyan pischa or pesachs, entryways, right? So regarding an entryway, we learned also regarding entryways, right, that they need to be a minimum of 4 tfachim. Afilu Rabbanan modu di'ika dalad adalad chashiv v'lo lo chashiv. That if there is 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim in this window, so then it's considered significant. If it's less than that, it's not significant. This is not a question of lavud. This is a question of openings in walls. Okay. Pachis midalad v'chulei. So we said that if the window was less than 4 tfachim, so then it's insignificant, and you would be unable to join together. The two chatzeros would be unable to join together. Pshita, this is obvious. Kevin the Amar dalad al dalad besoch asar. Since we had very clear instructions in our Mishnah of what constitutes an opening in the wall that would enable the two chatzeros to join together, and that definition is 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim minimum size for the window, and it must be within 10 tfachim of the ground. So then mimela, so then I know automatically, anu yodaina, the pachis midalid, that if the window is less than 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, ulimayla miyud, or if the window is above 10 tfachim from the ground, lo, well then, these chatzeros would be unable to join together, because there's a proper wall between them, and they're considered separate, they cannot join together. So the Gemara answers, HaKamash Malan, Taima, Dichule Limala Miyud. So what this Mishnah, what we're learning now, when we say that if it's above 10 tefachim, then they cannot join together, it means that it has to be entirely above 10 tefachim for them to be unable to join together. But if even part of the window is within 10 tefachim of the ground, well then then it's their choice. If they want to make their own Eruv, they can make their own Eruv. If they want to join together, they can join together. It's up to them. Tanina la detanu Rabbanan, we learned in a Mishnah that which the rabbis taught, Kulo, or maybe in this case it's a Brisa, Kulo lemala miyud umiktasu besoch asar. If you have a window that is almost entirely above 10 tefachim and it's only just slightly within 10 tefachim, Kulo besoch yud, or if it's entirely within 10 tefachim, umiktasu lemala miyud, and only just a tiny bit of it is above 10 tefachim, me'arvin shnayim v'mratzu ma'arvin echad. If they want, they can make separate Eruvs. If they want, they could join together. So again, we see this concept of, as long as only some of the window is within 10 tefachim, they can join together. It doesn't have to be entirely within 10 tefachim. So, hashta kulo l'malam yudu miktasu b'soch yudu amat ma'arvin. 1 second. So we just said that if it's almost entirely above 10 tefachim and only slightly within 10 tefachim, they can make an Eruv together if they want. V'imratzu ma'arvin echad, or if they want, they can make separate Eruvs. If they want, they can join together in one Eruv. Kulo b'soch yud u'miktasu l'mayla miyud mibaya. Well then, in a case where it's almost entirely within 10 tefachim and only just slightly above 10 tefachim, obviously they'll be able to join together in an Eruv if they want. So, zo ve'en tzarich zo katani. The Gemara answers no. It's like a this and not, and certainly you don't even have to say that. Meaning, they're saying, yeah, if it's almost entirely above 10 tefachim, right, and it's slightly within 10 tefachim of the ground, so then it's okay. They could still join together in an Eruv if they want. And it goes without saying that if it's almost entirely within 10 tefachim of the ground and just ever so slightly above 10 tefachim of the ground, certainly then they could join together in an Eruv if they would like. Now we get to some math. Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Yochanan, Chalon Agul. If you have a round window, so now obviously we've been saying up until now, if you have a square window, it's going to be 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim. Rabbi Yochanan wants to know, what about round windows? What dimensions do we need? Tzarich sheyeh be'akefo esim v'arba tefachim. V'shnayim umashu mehen b'soch yud. So you need that this circle is going to have 24 tefachim in its circumference, okay? So this circular window is going to have a circumference of 24 tefachim, because the assumption is that if the circle is 24 tefachim circumference, well then you'll be able to have a square inside of this circle that is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, which is the size of our window. V'shnayim umashu me'en b'soch yud, and you need that 2 tefachim of them are within, 2 tefachim and a little bit of them are within 10 tefachim of the ground. She'im yirab'enu nimtza mashu b'soch yud, so that if you make it into a square, so then some of it will be within 10 tefachim. Meaning, so what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is that if you have a window that it has a circumference of 24 tefachim, so then the square, then you can have a square inside of it that is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, and the parts of the circle that are outside of the square are going to be 2 tefachim. Okay, so basically you have the square is 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, and there's 2 tefachim of circle that extends outside of the square on all sides. So then there's basically it's a diameter then of 8 tefachim in this circle. Now the circle has to be within 2 tefachim, that basically a little bit less. It has to begin a little bit less than 8 tefachim from the ground, because that way the bottom of the square, which is like our 4 by 4 window part, will be within 10 tefachim of the ground. Now the Gemara asks, Michte, 1 second, that any circle that has a circumference of 3, yesh bo birochbo tefach. Well, then its diameter will be 1 tefach. So then, betray sarsagya. So why do I need 24 in a circumference? All I should really need is 12, right? If we're going to assume that a circle is 3 times, the circumference of a circle is 3 times its diameter, well, assuming that we're just looking for a circle with a diameter of 4 tfachim, well then all I would need then is a circumference of 12 tfachim. So the Gemara answers, well, hane mile be'igula aval beribua ba'inan tfei. So yeah, but that is only if you're looking to get the diameter of a circle. If all we needed was that the diameter of a circle should be 4 tfachim, then sure, the circumference would be 12. We agree with that. However, that's not what we're looking for, right? A circle that has a diameter of 4 tfachim will fit within a square that is 4 tfachim by 4, right? Each side is 4 tfachim. And therefore, if the size of the window is 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, and this circle with a diameter is, and we have a circle of 4 diameter, right, with a diameter of 4, and it fits within this circle that all the sides are 4 tfachim, so clearly the square, the circle with a diameter of 4 tfachim fits within this square whose sides are each 4 tfachim, so then clearly this circle is smaller than the square. So we're going to need the square to be larger than 12. We're going to need this circle to be larger than the circle. Oh my goodness gracious. The circumference of this circle is going to have to be larger than 12 tfachim because the circle is going to have to be larger since it fits within this square, which means that to get the circumference of the circle to be equal to the perimeter of the square, it's going to have to be larger. Maybe? Got that? I mean, cool. Let's go weiter. Let's go weiter for a second. Right? So if we were just looking for the diameter of a circle, if we were just looking for a circle with a diameter of 4, then that's all we would need. But we don't need that. We actually need a larger circle in order to get the circumference of the circle to be the equivalent of the perimeter of the square. How much is a square larger than a circle? We all know this by now. Revia. A square is 25% larger than a circle. Well, if that's the case, b'shitzer sagya. Well, if that's the case, well, perfect. A square that is 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, its perimeter will be 16 tfachim. Well, there you have it. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for a circle, right? We want the circle and the square to have the same perimeter. If the perimeter of the square is 16 tfachim, so then the circumference of the circle is 16 tfachim. There you have it. So why is Rabbi Yochanan saying 24 tfachim? All we need is 16. So the Gemara answers, well, hani mile igula dinafik migo ribua. Well, that would be if we're talking about a circle that is in a square. But aval ribua dinafik migo igula ba'inan tfei. But what Rabbi Yochanan is talking about is a square that was inside of a circle, in which case the circle is actually bigger than the square, and it's containing the square. The circle is larger, and the square is inside of it. Right? My time, how come we need the circle to be larger? Mishum murshid dekarnisa, because the circle has to be able to contain also the points of the square. So the circle is going to have to be larger than the square if the square is going to be contained within the circle. Okay, but still, that's not an unsurmountable problem. Mirde, let's see. Kol amsa biribua, amsa vitrei chomshe ba'alachsona. If you have an amma in a square, well then the diagonal is going to be 1 2/5 ammas, right? So if you have a square, each of whose sides are 1 amma, well then the diagonal of that square is going to be 1 2/5 ammas. So now going back to our example of a square that's 4 tfachim, so basically if it was 1 tefach by 1 tefach, so then the diagonal would be 1 2/5 tfachim. Well, when the square is 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, so then it's 1 2/5 times 4, which is 5 3/5. Now Okay, so if we have a circle and within the circle is a square, so the diagonal of the square is going to be the same as the diameter of the circle. So basically we have a circle then with a diameter of 5 3/5. Now if the assumption is that the circumference of the circle is 3 times the diameter, well then 5 3/5 times 3 is 16.8, which is exactly what the Gemara says, right? So Kol amsa b'ribua amsa v'trei chomshei b'alachsona. So any amma in that on the side of a square, right? Any side of any amma that has any square that has sides that are each an amma. Well, the diagonal is going to be 1.4, okay, the 1 2/5 ammas. So b'shivsa nechichumsha sagya. Well, then all you need is 16.8. So why is Rabbi Yochanan saying 24? So Rabbi Yochanan Amar ki dayani de Kesari va'amri la k'rabbanan de Kesari. So the answer is that Rabbi Yochanan is saying like these rabbis of Caesarea, of these judges of Caesarea, some say it was these rabbis of Caesarea, the Amri that they say igula migo ribua riva, that a circle that's contained within a square, so the square is 25% larger than the circle. However, riva mitoch igula palga. But if you have a square within a circle, so then the circle is basically going to be larger than the square by half of itself. So basically, if the square is has a perimeter of 16 tvachim, so half of that is 8. So that's what we're going to take into account when calculating the circumference of this circle. So basically, 8 times 3 is 24, right? So that's what you're going to calculate as the diameter of the circle, and you're going to get a circumference of 24. That was the mathematical theory that Rabbi Yochanan was operating with. Okay, so the Mishnah had said pachas midalad adalad v'chule, right? So we said if the window was less than 4 tfachim, or if it was above 10 tfachim from the ground, so then they would be unable to join together in an eruv if they wanted, right? They would be unable to join together. They would have to have 2 separate eruvs. Fine. Amr Rav Nachman says, Rav Nachman lo shanu ela chalon shebein beis chatzeres. Now Rav Nachman says that this is only true about a window that's between 2 courtyards. Aval chalon shebein beis batim. But if you have a house that if you have a window that's between 2 houses, well then afilu l'mayla me'asara nami imratzu la'ariv ma'arvin echad. Then if you have a window that's between 2 houses, well then even if that window is above 10 tfachim, they could still join together in an eruv if they would like to. My time, how come? Well, because Beisa Kiman Dimali Dami, because we treat a house as though it is entirely filled in which case the window is actually within 10 tfachim of the ground, because the house is considered filled in, so like all the way up to the window is going to be considered ground anyways. Okay? Eis ve'Rav Rav Nachman. Rav asked a kasha on Rav Nachman. Echad li chalon shebein beis chatzeros, whether it is a window that's between 2 chatzers, ve'echad li chalon shebein beis batim, or whether it's a window that is between 2 houses, ve'echad li chalon shebein beis aliyas, or whether it's a window that is between 2 second floors, 2 lofts, ve'echad li chalon shebein beis gagin, or whether it is a window that's between 2 roofs, ve'echad li chalon shebein beis chadarim, or whether it's a window that is between 2 rooms. Kulan dalid al dalid besoch asara. For all of them, we need that it is 10 tfachim by 10 tfachim within 10 tfachim from the ground. So how could Rav Nachman say that a window between 2 houses, even if it's above 10 tfachim, they could still join together in one eruv, if we seem to have a brisa that's saying that the halachas apply equally to all of these configurations, including houses. So Targuma achatzeres. So Rav Nachman answers, no, you could say that is only talking about chatzers, not anything else. Ve'echad li katani. But what do you mean? It specifically says in the brisa whether this or that. In all the cases, it's going to be the same, including houses. And therefore, if you have a window that is less than 4 by 4, or if it's above 10 tfachim, so then the different houses would be unable to join together. So Targuma adalad adalad. So Rav Nachman says, no, you could say that's only talking about if it's 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim. That kilu, yeah, if the window is less than 4 tfachim by 4 tfachim, so then that would apply equally, i.e. that they would be unable to make a joint eruv. However, in terms of like the 10 tfachim from the ground rule, that's only for chatzeres. in a house, you can view it as though the floor is all, the house is all filled up with stuff, and even if you think that it's above 10 tefachim, it's really within 10 tefachim. But Amine Rabbi Abba mir Rav Nachman, Rabbi Abba asked a kasha from Rav Nachman, Lula apasuach min bayis la'aliyah tzarich sulam kabur la'atiro o ein tzarich sulam kabur la'atiro. Very interesting question. So if you have a living arrangement which is thus, that there is a ground floor and there's a loft, okay? So you have like one person living in the ground floor, and then you have another person who's living in a loft. So the question is, do we consider those like two separate living spaces? In which case we'll have to, and the way that you get up to the loft is there's basically a hole in the floor of the second floor, right? So it's like two floors of a house, okay? And the way you get up to the second floor is that there was like, you basically climb up through a hole in the floor of the second floor, and that's how you climb up to the second floor. And so what we're asking is, Ba'amina Rabbi Abba mir Rav Nachman, Rabbi Abba asked from Rav Nachman, Lula pasuach min bayis la'aliyah. So if you have this like hole in the floor of the second floor that is between the ground level and the second level, tzarich sulam kavua la'atiro. So if we want to enable these people to make an eruv between them, do they need a proper ladder to serve as a pesach, as because as we learned a few weeks ago, that sometimes we can consider a ladder to be like an entry, like an opening, and therefore, so do we need this ladder in order to serve as an opening, as a pesach between the two levels and enable them to make an eruv together? Or maybe you don't need a proper fixed ladder over there, because kiamrinan beisa kimandamali dami. When we say that a house is considered like it's filled up, and if we say that the house is considered like it's filled up, well then it's not above 10 tefachim, right? Because the whole floor is all filled up with stuff until it gets to that second level. So do we say that when it's kimandamali dami hani mile min hatzad ava be'emtzalo? So do we say that it's only considered like the house is filled up when the window that we're talking about is in the wall, and we can consider like the house is filled up with stuff until the window? But what if about a situation like this where there's a hole in the floor? Do we say that the first floor is considered like it's all filled up with stuff until it gets to the second floor where the hole in the floor is for this guy to get up to the second level? And in which case you wouldn't need any kind of like a special fixed ladder in order to serve as a entranceway between these two spaces? Or do we say that we don't consider it like it is all filled up with stuff, in which case you would need like a fixed ladder? So, right? So, Odil Maloshna, maybe it makes no difference, and we can consider it like the ground is filled up with stuff. So, Amar Le, so Rav Nachman said to Rabbi Abba, Eino Tzarich, you don't need this fixed ladder. Savar mina. Now Rabbi Abba thought from there that sulam kavua hu dulo de'eno tzarich ha sulam arai tzarich. Rabbi Abba thought that what Rav Nachman meant was that you don't need a fixed ladder, but you still need some ladder. Itmar, was stated, Amr Rav Yosef bar Manyomi, Amr Rav Nachman, echad sulam kavua ve'echad sulam arai eno tzarich. Rav Nachman actually says that you don't need any kind of ladder when there's this hole in the floor of the second floor, because we'll view it as though the first level is all filled up with stuff until the second floor, and they can make an eruv even without any special kind of ladder to treat it as a pesach. Fine. New Mishnah. Kosel shabein beis chatzer. So if you have two chatzers, and in between the two chatzers there is a wall. Gavoa asara, and this wall is 10 tefachim tall. Virochav arba, and it has a width of 4 tefachim, meaning like a thickness of 4 tefachim. Okay. Me'arvin shnayim ein me'arvin echad. Well, this is a proper wall. These two chatzers are considered completely separate, and they would be unable to make an eruv between them. Hayu birosho peris, if on top of this thick wall were fruits, Elu olim mikan ve'ochlin ve'elu olim mikan ve'ochlin. Well, then this chatzar can climb atop this wall and eat the fruits, and this chatzar, right, they can both kind of climb on top of the wall and eat the fruits. As long as they don't take the fruits down into the chatzar, because since this wall is 4 tefachim thick, and as Rashi points out, the 4 tefachim thick part isn't significant in terms of the fact that they're considered 2 separate chatzars. That's just because there's a wall that's 10 tefachim tall. The thickness really becomes significant here, which is that since it's 4 tefachim thick and it's 10 tefachim tall, well, it's its own rishus hayachid, and therefore you would be unable to carry from there into the other, into your own eruv, into your own chatzar. Nifratz hakosel ad eser amis. If there is an opening in the wall, up until 10 amis, so then ma'arvin shnayim. So then, as long as, I thought that it was 10 amos or less, but we seem to be saying over here that it's until, I guess is a question of ad v'ad b'chal or ad v'lo ad b'chal, whatever it is. But as long as this opening is less than 10 amos, as long as this opening is less than 10 amos, so then it's a regular Pesach in between the chatzars, and if they want, they could join together in an eruv. If they want, they could create separate eruvs. Yoser mikan, but if the opening in the wall is larger than 10 amas, ma'arvin echad ve'ma'arvin shnayim, well then, if the opening is larger than 10 amas, well then it's a pirza, in which case they don't have the option anymore to make separate eruvs because there's a breach in between the two chatzars. However, we're going to stop over here. That was daf Ayin Vav of Masechta Ayruvin. So let's just do kind of a quick recap. At the beginning, we talked about all sorts of interesting configurations where we have these townhouses that can serve as like gatehouses as well. We had this case where there were 2 townhouses in between these 2 chutzars, and the conclusion was that that you would not be able to use them as an eruv because we have to be kind of clear about, is this a house or is it a gatehouse? If it's a gatehouse and you can't use it for an eruv and it's a house, well then there would be an issue of walking through one house to get to the other house. We then started the new parak of Parak Chalon, and we had this important halacha, which is that when you have 2 chutzars and they're separated by a wall, so the way that they would be able to join together in a joint chutzar between the 2 walls, between the 2 chutzars, in a joint eruv between the 2 chutzars, is if the window in that wall is 4 tefachim or larger, and it is within 10 tefachim of the ground. But if it's above 10 tefachim, well then there's a proper wall separating them, and if it's larger than 4 tefachim, it's not significant. And if it's smaller than 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, it's not significant. We got into this mathematical thing about Rabbi Yochanan trying to tell us that you would need a circumference on a circle of 24 in order for you for that opening to be considered daled tefachim. And then towards the end we got to a new Mishnah talking about different walls dividing chutzars and different breaches, and we will continue from there tomorrow. Chevra, cheers.